Sergio was one of the founders of the Serbian nonviolent resistance group Otpor, which successfully campaigned against Slobodan Milosevic in October of 2000. He has served in the Serbian National Assembly, but then he also, with others, started the Center for Applied Nonviolent Action Strategies, which looks to spread the work of nonviolence, strategic nonviolence. He has been a Foreign Policy Magazine Top 100 Global Thinkers, and he is also a young global leader at
I'm
Davos.
not so young. But in Switzerland, you're young till you're 60.
Oh, good, I still qualify.
Of course, you should nominate you.
So anyway, you take it away.
Okay, first of all, glad to be here in Stanford, and you got two founders of Otpor and two members of Canvas today for twice one. This is Slobo Ginovic, my friend for 20 years, student, troublemaker, and chair of Canvas. And it's a rare opportunity to be here today. And we are so excited. This is our first, well, actually, Slobo's second Stanford visit. We got so many good friends here. One of our long-term friends and idols whom we just met is Mike McFall, one of the most knowledgeable people in the field of democratization. Another big inspiration and friend is Larry Diamond. So, but it's weirdly we've never been here. So for us, it is also a great opportunity. So let us. I mean, this sounds like a really serious biography. It's not. We don't take ourselves too seriously. This is how it started. We started as a young Belgrade students facing a crazy guy called Milosevic, and because basically everybody else failed to deal with him, including the fragmented opposition and the confused international community, we decided that we will be the hobbits to take the ring to Mordor, and for some weird reason, we succeeded in it. After 2000, Slobo into business, I went to Parliament, and this really started getting the crazy invitations. Like the Belarusians came to us, like, let's come to Belarus, we want to do the same thing as in Serbia, let's go to Zimbabwe, and things of that kind. And we first thought it is a hobby, but after being involved in training groups from Georgia and Ukraine, we understood that there is a deeper sense in it. And since 2003, we have this little non-profit based in Belgrade, which I work with groups from, I think, 45, 46 different countries now. Always learning, but also always trying to understand the phenomenon, which we call nonviolent struggle. We think this phenomenon is super important for the world, not only because your TV sets are looking like this more or less. Whenever you turn a channel, you see people protesting. There is a global rise in protest. There is this great study done by people from Carnegie, which says that actually people are protesting more and more about bread and butter issues, environmental issues, corruption issues, as opposed to the time when we were young and the majority of the protests were about human rights and the democracy. But whether about this or about that, we are looking at this phenomenon called nonviolent struggle, and we look at the people power movements that, in our opinion, are the most effective vehicle for hobbits, as opposed to political elites, to change the world. Also, what is really a recognizable trend, we are getting increase in the youth-led movement, student-led movement. So we like to call this youth quake because it shakes the world and it's shaken by youth. So we are going to talk a little bit about the phenomenon, a little bit about the science. There will be a little touch of science in it. This is Stanford. We need to be a little bit scientific, just to sound serious. And then we are going to take a look at the lessons learned and where we want to dig out. And then we're going to open it for your questions. What's the total time we have before people escape this beautiful room?
We end at 1:30.
Oh, okay, that's enough. Oh, so starting with this, this is where it became mainstream. Before 2011, it was limited mostly to the people who practice nonviolent struggle and to professors who research on nonviolent struggle, some whom I mentioned. And it was considered to be a kind of exotic science. What is this thing? Is this have to do something with Gandhi and Martin Luther King and blah, blah, blah? But in 2011, everybody got excited. That was the bad year for bad guys, because within the range of the year, Ben Ali of Tunisia went down, Mubarak of Egypt was down, Gaddafi of Libya was down, Saleh of Yemen and Assad were seriously challenged. On the top of it, Osama bin Laden was dead and Ratko Mladic was in Hague, and everybody started dancing and singing and saying, oh, the world will be democracy within the range of the next 15 years. We are witnessing the next way. Well, you know, as with any good party, you occasionally want to think about a hangover. And I think we are witnessing the idea that, yes, we may understand well how to mobilize people and to challenge the bad guys, but it's really important to understand how to follow up the successful nonviolent movement with a successful and stable transition. And this is one of the big challenges that we are witnessing everywhere. We are working in one of the questions for this. Second, however excited we get about the TV news, you may occasionally want to look at the result. This is a Freedom House chart. There are many of the organizations around the world measuring the numbers. And this graph actually shows you the number of the free countries, partly free countries, and non-free countries. And you can see that aside of the big wave in the 90s, we are kind of stagnating. The question is, how come that the movements are becoming effective, but we are stagnating? The answer is in a great book by a friend of ours, Will Dobson, which is called Dictators Learning Curve. The bad guys tend to learn as well. So we are looking at the learning curve of the movements to learn how to design their vision, mobilize social group, build up numbers, challenge oppression, as opposed to we are looking at the bad guys for learning variety stuff from censoring social media to even making their own movements like Putin did with Nashi to take over the space that will be eventually taken by their opponents if they don't. So looking at this curve and trying to understand what are the most important skills we need to work on and what is the skills the bad guys are working on, it's a probably very interesting task for serious academic institutions around the world. First of all, it's how little we know. And I think how many of you have taken a history course in life? Okay, what proportion of your history textbook was related to wars? 60, 70, 80%, depends. I know my textbook was, our textbooks were full of the famous Serbian historic victories and defeats, and it was all. And when you walk through the park, the normal person you see on the monument is not looking like Gandhi. It's normally the tall guy on the horse and he has a sword. And for some reasons, our history is dominated with violence. But when you look at the outcomes of the First World War, Second World War, Cold War, and we look what these were waged about, like ideology in the Second World War, would you really mind killing somebody in 2015 because he or she is a communist? It's not really working. On the other hand, we don't know much about the people who are really important for some changes that we are living every day, because you have probably seen 10, 11, 12, 13 movies about one single stupid proxy war in Vietnam. So you have a pretty thick DVD collection. And then when you look at how much you know from the popular culture, you will find one good movie, The Ben Kingsley about Gandhi, one or two with latest one coming about Martin Luther King, and then probably one super cool about Harvey Milk, which we paid a visit to his city hall yesterday here and walked the Casper next to his camera shop. But our popular culture is also dominated by violence. But when you look at the consequences of Gandhi's work, and you take a look at that was the beginning of the end of the colonialism as we know it, we take a look at the consequences of Dr. Martin Luther King's work or Nelson Mandela's work, and understand that we are living in a world where it's highly politically unlikely to judge a person per color of skin. Or you want to take a look at a non-educated electrician from a shipyard in Gdansk, Lech Walesa, who started a movement which effectively kicked 1 million Soviet troops from their most important occupied territory, and that we are living in a united Europe now. So you can really understand that the consequences of these movements are really, really interesting thing to study. So we think it should be studied both academically and in the praxis. How it works is like when you quote Martin Luther King, who said that there is more power in socially organized masses on the march than there is in the guns in the hands of the few desperate men. Our enemies would prefer to deal with a small armed group rather with a huge unarmed group of people. Then you understand the dynamics. Military change, violent change, elite-driven change always involves powerful small numbers. As opposed to the nonviolent struggle, when you look at your potential recruits, it's about everything. You know, you look at the people participating in the military struggle, male, 18 to 35, healthy, with some military training. It's a very limited portion of society. But when you look at the nonviolent mood, it's like everything. Teenagers, retired people, male, female, educated, non-educated, urban, rural, whatever. So when you look at these kind of things, then you also understand that the dynamics is in building numbers. And when you look at a very interesting study performed by two American scientists, Maria Stephan and Erica Chanovet, you really see the very interesting figures. They were studying 323 different campaigns, violent and non-violent, in the last 105 years. It's called Why Civil Resistance Works. It's a really, really cool study. And they came to the very, very interesting results. First, breaking the prejudice of what works, what doesn't work. Nonviolent struggle tend to work in 53% of the cases, as opposed to violent struggle tends to work in only 26% of cases. They also tackled the length of average campaign, because there is this stupid prejudice that violence is somehow faster. So if you want to do things faster, take a gun. Well, I mean, if you want to hunt down elk and skin an elk faster, living in Colorado, probably the gun is a good idea. But if you want to run a violent struggle, average civil war lasts for 5 years. Average nonviolent campaign lasts for 2.5 years. So it's not also twice more likely to succeed, but it's also more likely to succeed within the short period of time. Being a friend and follower of Larry Diamond and Mike McFaul, and being growing in non-democracy, also very important question is, what do you get as an outcome in the case of violent conflict, and what do you get as an outcome in the case of non-violent conflict? And these two results are even more shocking. 42% of non-violent campaigns. The study was done that they were looking at 5 years after the major social changes, change of the government, self-determination, and whether you have a democracy and stability 5 years after, because they consider this a decent transition period. 42% of nonviolent campaigns end in a relatively stable democracy and stability. Only 4% of Syrian, Libyan, Afghanistan, Kosovo scenarios end up in durable democracy. This is something which should be put in frame and put in the decision-making rooms of many countries in this world. So every time they came to the idea that only because they have only one tool in their toolbox, that's military, every problem looks like nails, so let's go and bomb them. But what do you get out of this is also a very important question. So we are looking at this phenomenon. It looked really like an eye-opener for understanding it. So it's not like we are preaching nonviolence because we are super ethical people from California who want to sit around the yoga room on CFO, holding our hands and singing. This is just what works and what doesn't work, and what is the delivery you get at the end. We were also, every time you work with a nonviolent movement, it always starts the same. There is a bunch of people coming in the room from Burma, and they say, oh, it worked greatly in Serbia, but this will never work in Burma. People are too scared, and they have this habit to be, oh, this will never work in Syria. People are too scared. This will never work in the United States of America. People are too busy buying in Walmart. Well, yes, conditions count, but skills count more. And every struggle is different, context is different, the battlefields are different, but there are universal principles of success. You will never win without having unity, whether this is a unity of various social groups, whether this is the unity of black and white people, whether this is the unity of gay and straight people. You need to build a unity across the social spectrum, because this is where the numbers are. Numbers are always in the middle. They're never on the fringe, whatever is your fringe you're starting from. And then, of course, the second one is planning. Too often we see TV anchors standing in front of the burning building of the parliament while 1 million people are cheering in front, saying, oh, what a spontaneous nonviolent uprising. There are only two types of nonviolent revolutions in this world. They are either spontaneous or successful. If they meant to be successful, they need to be meticulously planning. And we are looking at how the strategy is breaking down and how you plan forward, and how you plan backward, and how you plan down to the tactics. Also, more and more, the people are witnessing the importance of this bread and butter issues. What is the social and political battlefield that will get people involved? People will get involved only if there is something for them in this story. And when you look at the numbers related to the things like corruption or election fraud, this is because people take it personally. And this is why they're ready to participate, as opposed to talking about the ideals and ideologies and human rights and all this abstract thing. Of course, nonviolent discipline, the main thing that differs violence from nonviolence, is also important. And we try in our courses and seminars to teach it as a skill. Because obviously we have 100,000 people peacefully mobilized to do X, Y, Z. And then you have 5 idiots ready to start throwing stones and burning cars. Guess who is on the cover page of the New York Times tomorrow? So one single act of violence can contaminate the whole nonviolent movement. Being a Serb and growing up on a Monty Python's Flying Circus and being absolutely non-serious about anything in this world brought us to this genius idea to examine yet another phenomenon in the nonviolent struggle, the role of humor, and the phenomenon we call loftism. Role of humor in nonviolent struggle is threefold. First, when you look at the traditional sociology theory from the 19th century, when you look at the faces of Lenin and Che and Mao and all these, they're super serious. And you know, the theorists will say, of course they're super serious, they're involved in the serious business of revolution, so they need to be serious. Whether if you look at the modern activists, they look like they escaped from the rave party. They sing, they dance, they're using whistles, they're using drums. It's very relaxed atmosphere. I mean, you just take pictures from Hong Kong like 2 years ago, and you will get the drill. Humor and being lightheaded in a nonviolent struggle serves 3 purposes. First of all, humor breaks fear. And this is our human nature. If you are preparing for a major surgery or listening to your dentist, which terrifies some of us, the last thing you want to learn is about the procedure. Okay, we are going to open your chest, we're going to put these beautiful things in, and this. No. But if your friend cracks a joke, immediately fear disappears. So this is your human nature. Second part of your human natures, and we are social animals, is starting to think who is the most popular and coolest person you know. The richest one, the most educated one, the best looking one, or the one who can always make you laugh. So what works for your environment works for people as well. Funny people attract cool people. This is how it works in life, this is how it works in political movement. So we also figure out third and most important part of it, which is the element of the dilemma. In 1999, we were about 20 people with a budget of $57. And then we came with a super politically incorrect idea, political correctness in Serbs that doesn't that count. So we put the face of President Milosevic on a petrol barrel, put it in the main Belgrade pedestrian district, attached a big beautiful bat next to it, put a hole on the top. So you could come in, put the coin in, like in a pinball game, take the bat and express your love. And guess what? There was a line of the people within the range of 20 minutes, all the way down the main shopping districts, and everybody was having fun, and kids were hitting the barrel. But that was not the funny part. The funny part was when police arrived. So if you would be policeman that day, what would you do? Arrest us? We are nowhere to be seen. We're having espressos 3 blocks away. Arrest downtown shoppers, bring them to the police station, and accuse them for what? I mean, they'll be released in a blink of an eye. Of course, they did the most stupid thing. They arrested the barrel. So the picture of the barrel with Milosevic's photo being brought to the police car probably harmed the authority of the Serbian police more than any bad thing you can tell about them. And this is the power of the dilemma action, is what makes loftism, is that you're building your strategies and tactics around the idea that you're putting your opponent between the rock and the hard place. So if they react, they will look stupid. If they don't react, they will look weak. And everybody will start doing it, understanding that people can get away with it. Fast forward to my friend Mike's former job. 2012, Varna, Russia. There were protests. Putin was caught stuffing ballot boxes. He would win these elections anyhow, but he needed to get 75%. And then people would start protesting, and they could do it in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but they were banned in small places. So in a place called Barnaul in Siberia, too small to be found on the map, people came to this genius idea: if we can't protest, our toys can. So they build a little Lego town, and you can take a look at the Guardian and find a little video, and everybody's having fun, blah 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 blah. And then what happened was that the thing went viral, and these photos of little toys showing 146% votes for Putin were all around the internet, and people were having fun and getting comments. Now somebody in Kremlin understands that this is not going to work, and they pick up the phone and they call the chief of police in Barnaul, Russia, and the poor soul had to do the most stupid thing in the history of the police, probably, to step in front of the cameras and officially read a piece of paper that one protest of 100 Kinder Surprise toys, 100 Lego people, 20 model soldiers, 10 toy cars is banned because the toys are not citizens of Russia. And only citizens of Russia can protest in Russia by the constitution of this country. So, when you put this in a wider context, this is low risk, creative, probably $5 budget action. I mean, I know enough people who have kids to build a little town myself. And when you look at how it works, like now you're having this guy who poses shirtless, who wrestles Siberian tigers, save dolphins from drowning. He's afraid of it. Doesn't really work. So it's like this is exactly the creativity and the point in which these movements are becoming unbearable for the regime. Because people in power, they share one thing in common. They start taking themselves too seriously after a certain amount of time. And when you mock them, they just don't know how to deal. That's it. So they believe this picture of them in newspapers, in the cars. Okay, now I will leave the rest of the story to my friend Slobo, because I know this is funny, but we're witnessing several really serious challenges. First one coming from the Arab world, which is related to transition. Second one coming from Ukraine, which is related to durability of the change and the methods you use and the occupiers. And of course, the last one coming from Hong Kong and all of this hype we have about the new media, but is it still the thing worth hyping? So, Slobo, take it from here.
So, my name is Slobo. It's not a famous name, but no one actually names their kids anymore like that.
I wanted to send him to heck, but there was no more side.
Yes. And so what we do, I'm a Fletcher graduate, and Raphael, who's our colleague, is as well. And so we kind of try to study several things in what we do once we do the trainings and in our academic courses. Now, the whole point about strategic nonviolent conflict is, first, we kind of endorse the idea that it's like any other warfare, okay, just waged by the nonviolent means. So also, as Sergei mentioned, that we kind of look at it as asymmetrical conflict, where we basically are saying we want to get to the numbers. And so how do you get the numbers? And the numbers are ultimately the measurement for the successful movements. So how much people we can attract, get, and how much of their time we can get for us to do and commit. So, and a long time ago, there was one game that has been developed. It's called Force More Powerful, right? I don't know if any of you guys tried it. It was wildly interesting, and in the end, not so successful attempt, because the game was so difficult. We built the engines in such a way that no one could win actually. But one interesting thing about the engine is that the end game is that the activists and the volunteers will be looking with two parameters: fear and enthusiasm. And so the point is, like, how do we diminish the fear of the activists and therefore bring the enthusiasm? And by doing that, we're going to make them more active. Okay. And so another thing is that once we work with people in different countries, we try to get into the understanding of their environment first, and then get them really to try to forecast future events. And the main misconception that Gene Sharp talked about was the structure of the political model, which most of the people assumed is monolithic, and we kind of tried that. In Serbia, we've been trying to deal with Milosevic as he's the only guy who's running, doing, making decisions, and even beating people in the street. So our only demand for about 8 years was like, we want him down. And that was always the same request, like we want Milosevic to resign. And we failed. We've been failures for about 8 years. And then we understood that we need to change our tactics, that basically the whole system, it's made of different stakeholders. And the interesting thing lately for me, the paradigm, once he was in Hague Tribunal, the prosecutors had actually very, very big difficulty to provide, in which case and instance he was actually guilty, because he would be calling upon the parliament, the Ministry of Defense, the associations, international community, all kind of institutions which he would call upon their decisions, as saying they have the autonomous role in this society, and so it was their decision to do certain things. And so once you study that, then you see the right way is to try to approach the pillars. So you're trying to identify the pillars, and you're trying to see which of those are the most important and relevant. And so we developed several models, but one of those that we widely exercise is called paragraph. And so we try to put those pillars in the framework and sequence of the past events. So we study a certain period of time in, let's say, the recent history of a certain country, and we see exactly which events cause these pillars to go one way or another way. One or another would be pro-government or the pro-opposition, or us an adversary, whatever that may be. And we study where are they exactly. And if you look at that, you get a very interesting map of what caused them to shift away and to shift down. For example, in Serbia, we understood that during the wars and conflicts, including the Bosnian, Croatian, and Kosovo war, the bombing, we had actually all the pillars going through Milosevic. So he was consolidating his power during these conflicts. And then the natural consequence was like, did he actually try to provoke some of those to consolidate his power? And that was one of the things and the conclusions you could make. The next thing is, like, just by studying Iranian society, and the Iranian society, for the people that we worked with, was extremely difficult, because they would say, like, you cannot gather more than 3 persons in the streets, and it's already assumed the protest, it's against the law. And then we studied the history again, and we saw that all the pillars were shifting away from the government for 3 days, and everybody had been celebrating in the streets. And that was when Iranians won their football match, soccer match against Australians, and they qualified to the World Cup. So everybody had been celebrating. And so the natural point of ours would be, well, the World Cup qualifications happen every 4 years. So if you assume that they may win again, you want to start planning right now, because there is going to be the window of opportunity. And so by sequencing the tactics, as Sergey explained, which are using delactivism, which are predominantly and hopefully dilemma actions, we are always saying, like, it's important to build the numbers. In order to build the numbers, you want to sequence the victories. So you want to know when to proclaim the victory. And the conditions for the proclamation of the victory should be, in most ways, once there is a perception, not really even the case, but perception that the numbers have been grown from the previous action. Then the most of the people always study and look at the tactics of concentration. Tactics of concentration are extremely difficult. Logistically, you need people to be engaged, and it's difficult to maintain those. And in our case, once we've been walking downtown Belgrade, Milosevic was just sitting, waiting for 130 days until we get our shoes destroyed, until we get, tired, and until we miss any new ideas what to do next day. So tactics of concentration, then, if you put it in the framework of looking and dealing with the pillars, you want to do only at the end, once you have the big numbers. That's why there is no spontaneous, successful, nonviolent struggles, because the numbers you need to gain, and the numbers you achieve are then where basically the main pillars of the force are going to be influenced by those. Because these guys are influenced only when they see big numbers. Why? Because their loyalty shifts. And it shifts because they believe, oh, God, now in the streets we have probably many of our friends, maybe kids, who we need to beat, shoot at, and so on and so on. So usually that's one of the big problems, that people and strategists of the movements trying this and doing their nonviolent struggle, whatever that may be, it's regime change or, and environmentalists or different kind of stuff, they start immediately with protests and rallies. So we speak about vision. So we say, like, let's start with the vision. Let's start with something that's the common denominator for all parts of society that we want to integrate. And then we speak about as well and study the horizontal negotiations and the skills of the leadership to horizontally negotiate and build what Sir just said, the unity around a certain cause. And once that's built, then you start doing the sequences of the tactics. You keep on proclaiming the victories. You change successful records of the things that you have done. And those can be the actions of dispersion, small acts, bread and butter issues. But it's important to build the numbers. And then wait until the moment then we can actually get a lot of and big numbers out. Now, speaking of negotiations, there are two aspects of the nonviolence struggle. Mostly, in most of the cases, these kind of struggles finish in some sort of vertical negotiations. Okay, we agree with adversary about some terms, but that influences each other extremely frequent and a lot. So when do you basically need to build a unity, and how do you make sure that your movement is immune for the infiltration? How do you send appropriate messengers? How do you select the messengers which are appropriate for the certain things? And how do you maintain this growth path throughout the whole time? So in many cases, as we spoke about, especially recently in the Arab during the Arab Spring cases, people would argue that some of these revolutions have been overtaken. Like, yes, there was a change, but then the Muslim Brotherhood won. Yes, and they won, but I don't know, 5 to 8 million votes out of 40 million voters. And then who comes afterwards and who deals with transitions? So many times these kind of changes do actually go and navigate towards the ways which have not been in the first place planned or actually organized by the certain groups or individuals. Unity throughout transition, it's a big issue because this is now the effect. What happened with us, with our movement, once we had Milosevic? Well, we had a bear at the door. Whenever, we kind of had moments, or what do we do next? How do we make our movement operating? And there is one analogy we used to say: movements are like sharks. If they stop, they die. They need to, keep on operating. And so Milosevic was a big pressure on us, and therefore unifying factor. So once he was removed, 10 days afterwards, we voted for the first time about certain things, and we never ever voted before. And the first time we ever voted, we took actually a very difficult decision. And the decision was whether we transform movement into the political and we go for the elections in December of 2000, or we don't. And that's where we split. And that was ultimately the end of the movement. And the most of the movements that we worked, Mara, Pora, Zakwana, Zubr, whatever, name it, Pulse of Freedom, many of these places we've been to, they always have the problems once there is not adversary that's so strong that pushes them, towards unity. And the other recent notice that we kind of understood is happening, it's proclaiming, victory too soon. Like, I guess that you guys, and those who are scholars and academics over here, we're all talking about transition. How do we sustain the democratic path of certain society? Now, in our case, and in case of Serbia, and that's throughout the whole Eastern Europe, we have to say there is only one remaining heritage of the nonviolent social change, and those are the free and fair elections. And the places which basically succeeded in maintaining those, they're doing well. Today's Prime Minister of Serbia is the guy who used to be Minister of Information during Milosevic, and he was the guy who arrested me in 1999. And so, but he actually changed a lot in at least what his policies. I don't know whether he entirely changed, but he is pushing Serbia towards EU much more than anybody else before him did. He's much more, pushing towards joining the Western standards than actually any of democratic governments did. The same case in Slovakia with Fico. The same case happened with even within the Georgia. But the problem is, like, if there is no that element of free and fair elections, then basically these changes do tend to slide back. Now, just to provoke you, the question is, like, what would happen with Egypt if, in any event, the Muslim Brotherhood would have been defeated in the elections instead of the coup? For the first time, we have had the political, organization, which is the Muslim, based organization, which is, very, very old. and they've been caught into the political arena. They won elections, and then they suddenly understood, like, no, the preaching about the religion, it's not going to make the food on the table, and it's not going to help the economy, and so suddenly people understood, oh, they're not inclusive enough. But I just wonder what would happen if we would have had the opportunity to get them to the elections again and defeat them in electoral process. Maybe that would be the first lesson of that kind in that part of the world. Now, the big difference, though, between Eastern Europe and the Arab world is that we do, rightfully, I have to admit, have kind of the ideal. We knew what we wanted to look like. We wanted to be the part of the EU. So there was some goal for us to strive towards. Okay, so I guess in that case was easy. But proclaiming the game over and like making sure that now it's time to celebrate and we do not think about what happens next, meaning there is no path for the transition, is something that we in our organization deal a lot. We are advocating for that. We were trying to push international organizations to go in the field quick as much as as they could, and we were pushing them. Unfortunately, I think that was not really effective as much as we wanted to do. Now, the challenges Sergio already maintained. He mentioned some. Nonviolent discipline is, of course, the most important one, and that's reason for which most of the movements get compromised, because some infiltrators or somebody just starts throwing the rocks, and then the whole concept of nonviolent struggle goes. It's not that we are talking about the ethics or the morale. We are talking about the numbers, because dealing with nonviolent methods, your ability to attract people widens. Your market for that, it's huge. Why? Right? I mean, the old people, young people, kids, everybody can participate. Once it becomes violent, you're narrowing, the group of the people that you can attract that actually wants to participate, and then you're at the compromise. So we've been developing some of the methods and the whole curriculum on how to maintain the nonviolent discipline. Then getting away from occupation of the space. This is, the Occupy was, for example, famous for that. Apart from actually being the movement who didn't know what are they for. They knew what are they against, but they never actually, I never heard about what, and Sergio was doing some training for them, like how, what was the vision? What were they for? And then the occupying physical space is, again, logistically very demanding. And that actually, it's very common and frequent action that the governments and the dictators actually do. Will Dobson, in his book, Dictators' Learning Curve, it's talking that the most of the Iranian government actually has been doing, they were trying to occupy the physical space before the opposition would do that. And so therefore, deny them from physically having the space and then sending any message about it. And from there, how do you consolidate your victory? How do you basically make sure that, and in our case, those were the elections, okay? So we had Milosevic, who was committing the fraud in the elections in 1991. And all our strategies and tactics have been actually made and organized, and we assumed that he's going to be stealing again. And so we gave him a big buffer zone. We knew that he would have about 1 million votes, and we said he's going to be stealing another million. So let's assume he's going to be having, and he's going to be saying that he got another million. So 2 million. Our campaign was 4,000,001 voter in the elections. So we wanted 4,000,001 person to vote, and so that we would have 2,000,001 vote on the other side. So everything that we have done, we planned for the day after the elections, not until the elections. And I think that was the big lesson that we did not actually successfully transform and pass on to some of the friends and the movements we worked with. Maintain the unity and fight separatism. It's as well the case of the lesson from Ukraine and recently what's going on. So I guess in southern, former southern province of Serbia, today is Montenegro, there have been the protests which happened like a couple of weeks ago, and you can see the difference. So you can see the difference whether these guys are having Serbian flags or they have Serbian, Albanian, Montenegrin, Muslim, and what's inclusiveness within the movements. It's basically what makes them really, sending the message of unity. And this is I guess very, very important one. This was assumed as the cleanest protest of all that we have seen. The way these guys in Hong Kong have been organized, and they've been, the way they have been spreading around their message. I think it was magnificent, but one thing only was the issue. Again, the tactics of concentration. like, logistically difficult, disrupting the whole system for too long time. It's almost impossible to maintain, especially because the system on its own was not really self-sufficient within the Hong Kong, because they've been actually operating on the level of the whole country. So again, that was the tactic that has been widely exercised, and the only one. So you need to widen your scope of the tactics. You need to start from small issues and take some time. Resistance movement and Otpor have been 20 people for about, 2 years, I guess. And for 2 years, we've been building impression of the numbers. And then just after 2 years, we started growing our numbers rapidly. And every action we have been doing was small, but with the intention to recruit new members. So, and I guess that was one of the reasons why we became successful, because that process we have engineered was really good, so that I would be recruited 3 or 4 times in different events. So people wouldn't know who I am, what I do. But then we would just push them recruiting. Widen your groups, of the participation, as I said, and try to educate them. Do not believe that only those higher level of society, in terms of the educated people who have been formed living in urban cities, that they're going to be enough. No. What we're trying to do, have to actually include all the parts of the society. And I guess that we learned from our lesson, and that was really the case. Our elections were in September 2000. Believe it or not, all our plans have been done to the point that we had production of the materials, clips, who's going to be doing what. Are we going to have the posters or stickers? We understood that Milosevic is going to be printing 5 million posters, and we said, there is no way we can beat him with that. So we did those small stickers, which were his finished. So we would just go and stick those on the top of his posters, and therefore taking over and copying his campaign. And it was easy and not time consuming. And there is a term for that called political jiu-jitsu. So we planned everything ahead for about 9 months before we even knew the elections are going to happen. And we actually did have a plans for about 2 years afterwards what we would do. And I think that was the ability that we have developed throughout the time. So, and the latest point, and that's what our organization is dealing with, and unfortunately so far, been trying to address some issues for about 3 years. We did several projects in Syria, and we worked with Syrians at the beginning of their conflict, and we especially focused on the areas which have been free of Assad's regime, so like Aleppo, Raqqa at the early stage. And we've been trying to build capacity for these guys to build the local councils, to self-govern themselves in these free areas. And I have to tell you, even 3 years ago, people we worked with, they were never actually afraid of the Assad. They talked to us about these weirdos, the guys dressed like coming from 18th century with long knives, killing people, cutting it off their fingers, hands, and whatsoever. And so that was basically, at that time, they've been more afraid of the ISIS, what has actually become, than actually of the Assad. And I think this falls into the category of non-state actors. And I think this is something to be thought through, because non-state actors are becoming increasingly influential. And as you can see, they occupy wide territories with tactics which we still do not understand. But there is one point to know, especially on this one. Many of our friends and activists from that region are saying, them beheading people, it's a message for you. For us, it's a different message. For us, internally, the message is court in Mosul has been missing to bring any verdict until they came for about 2 years. Once they come, that court made Sharia-based, but 500 verdicts in a matter of 2 months. And so, yes, they're whipping people, doing this and that, but it works. They're effective. And so, they obviously learned something on how to do something more effectively than actually we have been doing so far. And with that, I think this is the last slide, right? We would conclude. Yeah, no. This is as well the methodology that I believe it's important for us once we pass the message. So we just recently launched the course in Harvard, which is fully online based. And so what we want to do, we understood that by teaching only activists, we've been missing some other parts. We need to teach the elites about these concepts as well, so that they understand actually what's going on afterwards. And just working with activists, that means we removed Mubarak. But then how do we basically make these elites to understand that once you involve the army and the military on your side, you cannot get them to 5 because that's a coup. You have to moderate them to the level where they're actually able to vote, but nothing to do more than that. So this is for us great platforms, but then as well, like social media. I mean, clicktivism. Is that a mass movement? I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen something, that has been effectively happening in terms of the sustainable changes. So we do see the great effectiveness to speed up some messages that we can actually mobilize people much quicker, kind of, even do the blitzkrieg kind of events. But social media are just ways for communication and clicking, and that's what Serbs actually like doing. We would sit in bars and restaurants, and we would do this all the time. But then, once you need to get in the streets, that's a bit more difficult. So without people actually participating in a real world, I don't think that change is about to be made yet. So on the other side, it's a great it's great for usage of certain tactics, and some people actually have been great symbols. We can identify with certain people. We can actually open up the space for them to communicate, but still, it's just the communication tool. And this is something we have been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. We're trying to advocate that everything we've been doing, it's the knowledge that we kind of gathered. We're trying to build the skills for the people actually to use that. And as Sergio said, Maria and Erica actually proved that this way of concepts of the struggle are widely and much more effective than actually arms.